Hey y'all, this is Dr. Mandy, and you are listening to Dr. Mandy Unedited. And today we are going to talk all about sampling and settings. This is a continuation of our methodological endeavors from last week, where we talked about research approaches and design and a little bit about theory, even though that's not necessarily the methodological bit. But if you missed that episode, be sure to go back and check that out. But first, I gotta give you a little update on my life for the friends, you know what I mean? So, I want to talk about today how I went to my first festival in the UK over the weekend. And it was so exciting because I have not been to a festival in over 10 years. When I was younger, I actually used to be a musician. And so when I went to university and studied music, one of the universities I went to actually had a festival that they put on every year. And that was pretty epic, I'm not going to lie, because part of our education was like how to manage artists, how to plan a festival, how to book merchandisers. And the other really cool thing is that those festivals used to have a lot of my favorite bands from when I was a teenager. So it was just really epic every year getting to help out in those festivals and meet all of my favorite band members. But over the years, I've kind of gotten out of that because, first of all, it's just a lot of work to put on a festival. It is just pure chaos for like a year just to be able to put on a festival for a few days. And then the other thing is that as I get older, I found that my sensory issues have really exasperated. And so you probably know, but if you didn't know by now, I've got the ADHD, and I found over time one of the things that has really started to bother me sensory wise is just really loud music. But I think that's also in combination with having been trained to understand how to mix music and record music. So oftentimes it's also really unsettling to hear like bad mixes, you know what I mean? So yeah, that means I really haven't been to like a big concert or a festival in pretty much 10 years now. But this past weekend I went to the Armchair Adventure Festival in Cornwall. And so what that basically is, apparently, is just a festival of people who have done really big adventures, like go to Antarctica or bicycle across the US or climb Mount Kilimanjaro. And it also had the camping, the music. In the UK, the vans are a big thing, the decked out camper vans. So, everyone's brought their rig. And of course there was an amazing pub for my American friends. Like every event that you go to, there is some like full-fledged set up pub at these events. And I think it's amazing because like you can not only enjoy a drink whilst you're at the event, but if you want that like kind of pub atmosphere whilst you're there, you can do that too. But anyway, this was just a really epic event because I one of the things about me and my partner is that since we've been together, we always find ourselves just getting into these like really random once in a lifetime events. It's so cool. Like, I don't know what it is. I don't know what it is about us, but people will just like invite us to places, and all of a sudden we find ourselves in the middle of like this incredible thing. And usually, it's pretty much free to us. So going to this festival was a similar situation where we had a friend who was a speaker at the festival. He wasn't actually going to use his tickets, and so he gave them to us. So we packed up the car and yeah, we set up a tent when we got there, camped out for a couple of days and listened to all the music and all the really cool talks about like all these like crazy things that people have done. And I know people are like, well, Mandy, you're an adventurer. Look, these people have done extreme things. I'm just trying to survive life. And I think that's my neurospiciness talking as well, because people who are neurospicy tend to compare themselves to other people's lives. And I don't do that in a bad way. I'm just saying my vision typically is that, people are just doing loads cooler stuff than me. all of the time, but I'm really working hard on like not taking this life for granted and really treating it like an adventure. I think that is one thing I've learned from listening to the talks in this festival because I know that I've got a lot of privileges. I know that I've had a lot of unique experiences, and I just don't want to throw them out the window. I really do appreciate and value this life that I have. But anyway, before I get too sappy, yeah, I thought this festival was really great because one of the things that really struck me about this festival is like how clean it was. This was like a pretty medium-sized festival. Like I've definitely been to much larger festivals, but in the US, I feel like, especially like that it was like raining and stuff when I went. I feel like in the US, even a few days of a festival this size would have just been complete carnage. There would have been trash, rubbish everywhere. But I was really surprised about this festival that there was never a piece of rubbish on the ground, on the floor. So it was very clean. I noticed that like the bathrooms and the showers, people were constantly coming by and cleaning them up. And yeah, whenever people were packing up their campsites at the end of the festival, there was nothing left behind. So I was just really impressed by that. I don't know if this was because like this was like an adventure festival full of people that are like conscious of the earth or whatever. However, yeah, like just in my previous experiences of everything just being messy and gross and grimy, that was something that was really cool to see. And like I said, the music was so epic. Every single set that I went to, even like they had like a sub stage and a main stage, even like some of the smaller performances, they were all amazing, I thought. And like I said, I always have like an issue with like how people mix music, especially live music. However, the last few things that I have been to for live music, the mixes have been really, really good. So I don't know, maybe I've just been out of music too long and the technology has just gotten better, who knows? But now I've started thinking to myself, I've been branching out. I've been branching out with going to events like this. So recently I have been to a couple of really amazing concerts slash festivals. And yeah, I'm thinking that I'm gonna have to start, fangirling over some of these things and actually following some of these artists because they're just, yeah, like the music was just amazing, y'all. Anyway, y'all, Adventure Armchair Festival. I hope maybe I'll go back next year. It's also based on the land of one of those big English mansions. So, it's just a really cool vibe. It's a really cool vibe. But anyway, let's talk about sampling and settings. I think I've just started recording this like right as my ADHD medication is hitting because I feel like a live wire right now. But anyway, okay, sampling and setting. Before we get into deep to these two, I really want to offer a sage piece of advice to think about before we start thinking too heavy on these. So, as you begin to choose your sample, your participants, your setting, you need to consider feasibility. And I've talked about feasibility before, I've talked about it a million times. Your dissertation or your thesis, it's not meant to solve world peace, okay? So a good dissertation is a done dissertation. So when you are choosing these things, think about how likely you are to be able to accomplish them. I think that's a really important element that people always forget about. So, of course, like we're thinking like who's going to be the best group to interview? Where's going to be the best place to be? But you really have to think realistically about like, can I actually do this? So, for example, my study I did for my dissertation, I did it 100% online. And the thing is that I didn't actually have any links to potential participants. So I did my dissertation on collaborative leadership in co-ops. And whilst I knew leaders in co-ops that would have made good participants, I just felt like the people that I knew were too similar. And and I really wanted to make sure that I had a wide scope of leaders for my research. So that's why I chose not to really reach out to anyone that I actually knew and to depend on finding people online, really. But I knew this meant that I was going to have to scour the internet for potential participants. So I had to sit down for 3 or 4 hours every single day when I was looking for participants, and I had to search for people. I had to cold email people. I probably sent like 30 to 40 cold emails every single day. And, not everyone may be down with doing that kind of process. Maybe you think, like, I don't know if I can reach out to strangers. I don't know if I'm, maybe an adept enough at using the internet to think of where in the corners of Google am I going to be able to find people. And so I've seen how other people in my situation that choose to do this stuff online, it has held them back because they are just not sure how to approach it. And for myself, this was a very aggressive approach for me. This was something that it was really intimidating for me to do. I hate rejection, I hate bothering people, but every single day I woke up, I sat down, and I just banged it out. So when you're choosing a lot of different elements in your dissertation, but especially when you are choosing your sample and your setting, really think about what are you capable of doing before you choose whatever route you're going to go down. Okay. Also consider, are you going to be able to reach your desired sample or setting? Are you going to be able to get permissions that you will have to seek? So a lot of times when we're thinking about settings, especially, organizations will have their own ethical approvals to go to. So not only do you have to worry about your IRB approval for your school, but depending on what kind of site you choose, you might also have to, wait that, like, those months, those weeks, or whatever it is for approval for the site as well. And that can be applicable for participants too. Like if you do a study on kids, for example, you're going to need permission from their parents. You might, if you're doing it like for a school, you're going to need permission for their school. And what I'm getting at is that these things can take a very, very long time. They can not only grade on your mental health, but they will also like potentially hold you back from success in your dissertation. So just keep those things in mind, okay? Okay, settings. So where the heck is your research happening? That's all a setting is. It might sound simple, but it is important to choose a place that is going to cultivate the best information for your research. So ask yourself, where would my participants naturally be located? Is there a place that just seems like a natural setting in the context of your study? So, for example, if you are studying teachers, where are you going to find teachers? Probably at a school, right? So, if you're doing a setting such as a school, there might be gatekeepers that you're going to have to work through, such as a principal. So, there might be a third party that you're going to have to keep in contact with and update all of the time. And finally, you just want to think about, is the place that you're choosing for your setting the most accessible place for your participants? Are your participants going to be able to be there and meet you for data collection? Now, of course, a popular setting these days is online. This often can be just super convenient and accessible. I remember when I chose my setting as being online, I didn't need any site permission. So when I saw my colleagues struggling just, yeah, to get that extra permission that they needed, I didn't need any of that. However, just because, online might be convenient, it doesn't mean that it is the best setting. So many of the research projects that I work with now really value human interaction. So because of that, I wouldn't suggest online being a setting in those cases, because I know the participants and the stakeholders, they really value being together and community. And I know that I can show more respect and interest if I meet them at their way of doing things. Okay, let's move on to sampling. So this is just how you're going to decide who you're going to include in your study. Who are your participants going to be? And I know I've kind of like talked back and forth between sampling sampling and participants, but you get the gist. But when you are choosing your sample, you are not just simply choosing anyone that you think might be related to the topic. I see this is like the number one thing that I see with people. Sometimes I see people say that they are going to include a menagerie of different people with different experiences when they're like working on their project proposals and such. I always use the school example. If you're doing a study at a school, I see people that are like, okay, I'm going to talk to parents, I'm going to talk to principals, I'm going to talk to para-educators, I'm going to talk to the teachers, I'm going to talk to the students. But as I said before, these elements that we are choosing need to be intentional. They need to be specific because all of these things and any part of your methodology are contributing to answering the question. So when you're considering what kind of sampling method that you're going to take on, ask yourself who has the experience, who has the perspectives that will help me answer my research question. And that becomes your sample. The approach you use depends on, of course, like your research questions and your methodological approaches. So you can't just, choose any kind of sampling method you want, but you should choose one that best fits what you are trying to accomplish in your research. So there are two main categories of sampling, probability and non-probability. So probability is usually used in quantitative research, and this is just where everyone in the population you're interested in sampling has an equal chance of being selected. More basically, if you have a group of people you want to sample, you randomly select people from that group. Everyone had an equal probability of being selected. You have a couple of different categories for probability sampling, such as there's simple random sampling, which is just randomly selecting from a population. For example, if you took a completed list of students from a school, you assigned them each a random number, and then you randomly chose numbers to get your sample. That would be simple random sampling. You have stratified sampling, which basically helps represent like kind of important subgroups within a population. So for example, if you were going to study student stress, and maybe you think that academic year could affect how stressed out a student is, maybe you would divide the population that you have, which would be the students, into different years, and then you would sample from each of those year groups. And then you have systematic sampling, which is essentially you're just choosing every nth person in your population, and that becomes your sample. So for example, if you have a list of students and you decide that you're going to choose every fifth person to be your sample, there you go. That's systematic sampling. Now, non-probability sampling is the other category. This is more common in qualitative studies. So this is when you are choosing participants purposefully, not randomly. So some popular types include purposive, oh God, I don't think I'm going to say that word right. I'm not going to say it again. Sampling, basically where you select people with specific knowledge. Then you have snowball sampling. So this is where you might know somebody who would make a perfect candidate, and then you have them like recommend other people to you that also would be good candidates. So it's like you start out with one person, they recommend a couple people, those people might recommend a couple people. It starts to grow like a snowball. It's very creative, you know what I mean? Then you have convenience sampling, which is just when you have some people that are there and you use them because they're convenient. Such as if you wanted to do some interviews at like a mall or a shopping center, you would just, walk up to random people that are in the mall because they are the convenient sample. So if you got anything out of this discussion today, just remember whatever you choose not only needs to fit what type of research you are doing, but it also needs to make sense for your feasibility. So really consider your research questions, the context of your research, and what your capacity as a person, as a researcher is. Okay? Okay, all right. that is all for me today. All right, next week we're going to take a break from the heavy learning, okay? I am going to discuss how I managed, or not so much managed, my undiagnosed ADHD whilst doing my PhD. The thing is that I'm not so much about the diagnosis as more so like I see that there are various people out there that learn in vastly different ways than how we are taught. And I want to share my experiences with you because I hope that one, you can maybe learn a tip or trick or two, but also I really want people to understand that they are not the only person that might be struggling with a PhD because they have a learning difference or a genetic condition or even a physical condition. And so I want to talk a little bit about that. So if you're interested in that, please join me next week for that episode. So if you need some help, if you're working on starting your dissertation or thesis, if you are in the middle and you're completely lost, if you're at the end and you just really need help getting to that final push, guess what? Mandy is here for you. So if you would like to get a hold of me in that regard, you can email me at mandykf@gmail.com. So that's MANDIE, kangaroo foxtrot at gmail.com. Or you can also contact me through my website, which is www.drmandyedits.com. If you're interested in seeing what else I get up to in my life, you can check out my social media. I've got TikTok, I've got Instagram, I've got YouTube. You can find all of that stuff and also some digital resources and products on my link tree, which is in the description below. All right, y'all. I gotta go live my best life on my ADHD medication buzz. Don't forget to touch some grass today. Go outside, look at the sunshine. Don't sit here and stare at your computer all day. In the meantime, I will talk to you later. See ya, bye.